Good morning, everyone. It is Monday, August 2nd. I wish this could be part of the humidity podcast, but that one is just too long already. I wanted to just discuss why is it so rare to have 80-degree dew points in this country? Why? Why do we not experience, but yet the other countries by the Red Sea and the Persian Gulf, they do experience 80-degree dew points well into the 80s, and we don't? What's wrong over here? We have the Gulf of Mexico, so what exactly is wrong? The Gulf of Mexico is really, really warm waters. So first, maybe I should explain what dew point is, like I did in the previous podcasts, a couple other podcasts. I'll say it very quickly. The dew point is the most accurate way to measure humidity in the air. It's the temperature at which the environment would become saturated. So again, we have a large jar holds more water than a small jar. Heat expands. So the warmer it is, the larger the air molecules are, the more water vapor it could hold. Relative humidity is how much water vapor is the air holding compared to what it could hold. So what you end up with is 90 degrees with a relative humidity of 50%. Relative humidity of 50% usually the dew point's about 20 degrees lower than the temperature. That's not 100% exactly correct. It depends on what the temperature is. But if you have an air temperature of 90 degrees, relative humidity 50%, that's holding as much water vapor as 70 degrees could hold. So the relative humidity of 100%, when the temperature is 70, would produce a relative humidity of 50% when the temperature is 90. And a lot of times, by the way, a 90 degree heat in the afternoon drops to 70 at night. So it's not uncommon to see the relative humidity close to 100% in the morning and then drop to 50% in the afternoon. It's not that the humidity is dropping. The humidity is staying the same. The only difference is the relative humidity. Relative humidity is important. More so, I think it's more important for weather forecasters and dealing with the environment, what are the chances that the precipitation will be evaporating before it touches the ground. And it's more important for forecasters. It doesn't play, to my knowledge, it does not play a significant role in for our purposes in terms of how the air feels. The only time it would play a significant role is when we're dealing with borderline humidity. So dew points of 60 or higher are considered humid. Dew points of 70 or higher, or 72 or higher, are considered oppressive. Sometimes maybe even upper 60s. So when dew points are in the 70s, it's going to feel humid no matter what. When dew points are in the 60s, it's going to feel humid. But when temperatures get really hot, it's not going to feel humid, it's going to feel more dry. There still will be a heat index of a degree or two, but it's going to feel a little bit more dry. The relative humidity is so low. In the morning, it's going to feel humid. And when dew points are in the 60s, I think you do need a higher relative humidity in order for it to have that moist feeling. And I think if it's in the upper 50s with a relative humidity of 100%, I think it's also going to have that moist feeling as well. So I think that's where the relative humidity plays a role in comfort level when dew points are in the 60s, and also in the winter in terms of that damp feeling. But again, we go back to our question, is why are dew points higher than 80 so rare here in this country? Now, one thing you have to realize is that the temperature always has to be higher than the dew point. So the only time dew points of 80 degrees could occur is if basically the nighttime lows are going to be 80 degrees. I mean, high dew points will prevent the temperatures from dropping too low at night. The air temperature might be able to drop the dew point by a degree or two, but they will prevent those temperatures from dropping. So what you need to have an 80 degree dew point, basically what you need is a body of warm water. The coastal cities, I've noticed, on the Gulf of Mexico tend to have dew points which are 10 degrees lower than the water temperature. Now, why should that be? Why can't it be they have dew points which are equivalent to the water temperature? the air temperatures that come off of the water are about the same as the water temperature. So if you have the water temperature is 88 degrees in the Gulf of Mexico, the wind comes in off the water at nighttime, that air temperature will be, I guess since it's night, it will be a little bit less than 88, maybe at the coast, maybe 86, something like that. And during the day, because the sun is out, a little bit higher, let's say 90. But what about in terms of the moisture level? You have air coming in off of a body of water, hundreds of miles of a body of water, which has been 88 degrees. So let's say the dew point should be pretty close to 88, maybe 80, maybe also 86 or something like that. I think I know that humid air is lighter than drier air. I know we don't tend to think like that, but it is. So a baseball will fly higher in a humid air mass than in a dry air mass. It's counterintuitive, but that's the way it is. So that humid air rises above dry air. So I think the real humid air goes a little bit above the surface, and then on the surface we're left with very humid air, but not as humid as what just came off of the water. That's what I think. But in any case, it's about 10 degrees lower than the water temperatures. So the water temperatures, for example, today, 86 degrees in one part of Texas, 89 degrees in a different part. And then off the coast of Florida, it's very similar. There's one part which is 85, and I would imagine Miami, it's probably close to 90 by now, maybe even 90. I think maybe one time I've heard of a 91 degree water temperature, but the water temperatures tend to be in the upper 80s. So the dew points right on the coast are going to be in the upper 70s. They're not really going to hit 80. On occasion, they might hit 80. So why are dew points in the 70s so common? It's because we have a clear mechanism in this country to produce 70-degree dew points. It's just a natural phenomenon. When winds come in off the Gulf of Mexico, we're going to have 70-degree dew points. There's only one variable needed: winds off of the Gulf of Mexico. That's all you need. And then you have 70-degree dew points. That's it. To produce 80-degree dew points, you need at least two variables. You need winds coming in off of the Gulf of Mexico, and they continue blowing and blowing and blowing into Iowa. If you can get those winds to go into the cornfields of Iowa, and there's no drought, it's a year of a successful corn crop, that's when we get dew points in the 80s. The cornfields are able to bring the dew points higher into the 80s. Cornfields are like the most ideal, nothing could be greater than a cornfield to raise the dew point. There's like nothing that could possibly exist that could raise the dew point so high. No matter what is going on, the cornfield will always be able to raise the dew point. And the reason is because cornfields produce enormous amount of, it starts with the T, but we'll just call it the plants are sweating, plant sweat. I forgot, there's a word for it. And that sweat is evaporating. It doesn't produce quite as much as the ocean does. Not quite as much. But remember, the fact that the ocean's 5,000 feet deep, that doesn't increase the evaporation rate. You just need a little bit of water on the surface for there to be evaporation. So the ocean's producing evaporation. The cornfield's also producing enormous amounts of evaporation. The thing with the cornfield is that the cornfield is just as hot as the air temperature. So therefore, the dew points could go much higher. The maximum dew point ever coming off the Gulf can't be higher than the water temperature. It can't be higher than the air temperature. So I think the highest dew point ever recorded in this country was the dew point in 90 degrees, which occurred in Louisiana and in Wisconsin. So probably there was water temperature of 90, and that particular time somehow the dew point ended up being 90. That air did not end up going higher than the surface. It ended up being on the surface 90 degrees. So the cornfield could raise the dew points to raise it usually around 5 degrees. And then if you have solid vegetation with moisture in the soil going all the way from Louisiana, and there's no drought, into Arkansas, you can maintain the 78 degree dew point coming in off the Gulf of Mexico, it could remain 78, probably drop a little bit into Missouri, 75, but then it hits the cornfields and it goes up from 78 to 83 degrees, sometimes even from 75 to 83 degrees. When you have places by the Persian Gulf and the Red Sea, so there you have the water temperatures are hotter, and therefore the dew points are higher. Dew points are in the 80s because the water temperatures are in the 90s. And if they would have cornfields there as well, those cornfields would also raise the dew point by 5 degrees. They don't have cornfields over there as far as I know. So you have the dew points coming in off the water in the low 80s, sometimes mid 80s, but usually low 80s. If there would be a cornfield there, you would have dew points approaching 90 degrees over there. Maybe there are some type of cornfield, I don't know. But they don't have the cornfield. So dew points in the 80s are very rare over here. And that's because the Gulf of Mexico, although it's very warm water, the highest it gets is in the upper 80s. That's probably because it's further north of the equator than the Persian Gulf and the Red Sea, especially the Persian Gulf. That's probably further south, so the winter temperatures remain warmer. That gives the summertime a head start. Also, you're dealing with desert heat over there. You're dealing with air temperatures in many of these cities in the hundreds. Here in the Gulf states, we have temperatures in the 90s. So hundreds and teens is going to raise those water temperatures much higher. We could deal with why is it like that. I think part of it is the fact that it doesn't rain over there. They have a dry season, so that's part of it. So the highest dew points would be to move a cornfield over there. The cornfield will always raise the dew points no matter what, because there's no limit to it. Provided it's hot in Iowa. It has to be hot where those cornfields are. Last week we saw the highest dew points in Illinois because Illinois remained south of the front. It was hot. In Missouri, Illinois, temperatures were in the mid-90s, upper 90s. Many places down south were approaching 100. In Iowa, that was already after thunderstorm complexes moved through, which after that moves through, the dew points drop by thunderstorms. There's an outflow. Dew points go way down by thunderstorms. They go significantly down. You could see a dew point drop by 5 degrees after a thunderstorm. So the relative humidity goes up, but the dew points drop because the air temperatures drop. And also there's the outflow. The air from the upper atmosphere blows downward. That's when the air temperatures really drop. Perhaps a few hours after a thunderstorm, those dew points get higher again. So that's the answer. We have a natural mechanism in place in this country to produce 70s, dew points in the 70s. It's part of just the normal weather cycle here in this country. We don't have anything which is part of a weather cycle in this country to produce 80-degree dew points. We need to have two variables in place, and therefore it doesn't always happen. You also have to have certain conditions for those two variables. There can't be a drought. This year in Minnesota, there's a drought that's going to affect the corn crop. So there's different things that have to happen. Nonetheless, dew points in the 80s do happen and are probably most common in Iowa, perhaps Wisconsin. I'll have to double check with the Illinois after seeing what happened last week and Missouri. In any case, that brings this podcast to an end. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your interest.